it's this double standard that has been part of the American fabric, but because of ideology, it's invisible. And we could talk about just gun ownership in the Second Amendment. There really is a double standard, and the double standard is defined by race.
And I grew up in a world where overt expressions of that were not acceptable. You weren't allowed to generalize on the basis of race because the assumption was each person is an individual. I don't understand when it became okay to generalize about racial groups.
I think while some people have the luxury to be raised only being told to look at individual people, it should be no surprise to you that black people, in particular black men, have been taught forever that they have to be careful how they behave around white people, that the way they behave will be interpreted differently, that when they misbehave, it'll be punished differently, that if they laugh too loud, if they walk into a nice store. So with all due respect, Tucker, what was true for you has never been true for lots of people.
I mean, there are a lot of ways to respond to that. One, on a factual basis, and in truth, in a lot of places in this country, the main threat that African Americans face is not from white people, as you perfectly well know.
So I first want to respond to the first comment. I think is, while it's true that, of course, people of color face threats from other people of color, it's also true that white people face the overwhelming threat from white people. That is,
right.
People face threats from who they live beside. So
That's
I
right.
find
exactly.
But I think it's fair to point out that we oughtn't be too distasteful and say things like, well, the great threat. It does feed a certain uglier narrative that we don't want.
But why does the truth ever feed a, quote, ugly narrative?
It is deeply suspicious that people are so quick to say things like the main threat facing African Americans is other African Americans, but you never hear anybody say the main threat facing white people is white people.
So you say, for example, I will have to discuss with my boys whether they can truly be friends with white people. History has provided little reason for people of color to trust white people.
And the argument I make is, look, in a country where it turns out that when the most vulnerable people of color are under threat, those who they count on are nowhere to be seen. If we have a president who marshals forces of hatred and anger and divisiveness and, frankly, just danger, if the people who call themselves your friends are not going to push back against that, then maybe you can tell me why it is I should trust those people? Well, when those who count themselves as your friend see that others put you in danger,
right.
It is their opportunity to prove they're your friend. It's fine to be friendly with them, but these are not your friends. We live in a country where we oughtn't pretend that these divides have not consistently been on racial grounds. And we see that over and over and over.
That's true.
When
I agree.
When black people are in danger from, say, addiction, we get policing. When white people are in danger from addiction, they get rehabilitation. When black people don't have jobs, we get stories about why we're making the wrong choices. When white people don't have jobs, we get a presidential campaign about the forgotten class.
We know from just watching the news that most mass shootings seem to be committed by men, and research bears that out. The Violence Project, which defines a mass shooting as the murder of 4 or more people with firearms, says, quote, a staggering 98% of mass shootings are committed by men and disproportionately by white men. But one notable trend over the years has been how white mass shooters are often explained away as mentally ill or a lone gunman. And as Dr. Stephen Thrasher pointed out on Twitter over the weekend, when a white mass shooter is in his teens, like the 18-year-old Buffalo suspect, they are called teenagers. While black men, including those who are victims, like Michael Brown, are called an 18-year-old black man. The Associated Press, which published those 2 articles, later tweeted a correction to make clear that the Buffalo suspect is an adult. Joining us now.
Is there a double standard when it comes to policing in America? That question is being asked more than ever.
Jacob Blake was shot in the back 7 times by Kenosha police officer Rustin Shesky. Blake, who's now paralyzed from the waist down, is recovering in the hospital.
Jacob Blake allegedly resisted arrest just before the shooting, but he was unarmed and not acting in a violent manner. And here's what happened to the other suspect.
This graphic video capturing the chaos. A crowd appears to be chasing the armed man when he falls to the ground and starts firing. As police approach the scene, Rittenhouse can be seen with his hands up, but he's never taken into custody.
Two men and two very different police reactions. After killing two people and brandishing his AR-15 rifle in front of police, 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse was arrested a day later after driving back home. But not everyone thinks he was a threat.
So are we really surprised that looting and arson accelerated to murder? How shocked are we that 17-year-olds with rifles decided they had to maintain order when no one else would?
Possession of a dangerous weapon while under the age of 18 is a crime in the US. He should have been arrested right then and there. A stark contrast of what happened to Jacob Blake. Many have spoken out against the knee-jerk reactions by police that often end in tragedy, and the glaring disparity of how suspects are treated based on their skin color.
Dramatic body camera footage shows the officers approached the teens just last week as they were walking down a neighborhood street. One officer grabs one of the teens by the arms.
What's wrong? What are you on?
Man, you ain't got nothing on it. Why y'all trying to search?
Just relax. What are you doing?
What you guys doing? Why you trying to choke it? Why you trying to choke his neck, man?
Nobody's choking him.
Within the span of a minute, the teen is on the ground and in handcuffs.
Why you putting handcuffs on?
Charleston shooting suspect Dylan Storm Roof got a free meal from police on his way to jail. They went to Burger King. After about 16 hours on the run, the admitted mass murderer complained to cops arresting him in Shelby, North Carolina, that he was hungry, so police got him food from the nearby fast food joint. Roof, a 21-year-old high school dropout from Columbia, was arrested the morning after the massacre at the historic Mother Emanuel AME Church, which left 9 worshippers dead.
And that's what months of protests So what do the numbers say about policing in America?
In 800 jurisdictions, black people were arrested at a rate 5 times higher than white people in 2018, when accounting for the racial makeup of the cities and the counties those police serve. In 250 localities, blacks were 10 times more likely to be arrested than their white counterparts.
Despite making up only 13% of the US population, black people make up 28% of those killed by law enforcement. African Americans are 3 times more likely to be killed by police, despite being 1.3 times more likely to be unarmed. Yet 99% of police officers have not been charged with killing unarmed black people. Is there a double standard when it comes to policing in America? The statistics and overwhelming evidence suggests there is.
It's this double standard that has been part of the American fabric, but because of ideology, it's invisible. And we could talk about just gun ownership in the Second Amendment. There really is a double standard, and the double standard is defined by race. Blacks were allowed to own guns because the Second Amendment provided for it. But we know what would happen. Laws were put in place, statutes were put in place that limited access for blacks to be able to protect themselves at a time when the Klan ran the countryside. We have Jim Crow laws, really the black codes come on the books. 67 in California. The Black Panthers that basically were in the courthouse in Sacramento were exercising their Second Amendment, and within 2 months they changed the laws because they were seen as a threat. The Constitution was written for white free men, and it qualifies naturalized white free men of good moral character. Between Dred and Plessy, we know that the Supreme Court said that there are no laws of the Constitution that apply to blacks. So the idea that someone could even claim a right to the Second Amendment really isn't there.
Black people and firearms, like we've had a very different history and experience with firearms, just experience in this country in general than any other group that exists in this nation. As an organization, we want to be a place where black people can come together and we can discuss issues of gun ownership within our community and the history of that from the past all the way up to present day.
I tend to be in favor of the Constitution, so because the Constitution says it's the right that people should have, I'm going to co-sign. You know, individuals, they're guaranteed the right by the Constitution to have a firearm. So, I think that they should be able to avail themselves to that right.
He was trying to get out his ID and his wallet out his pocket.
We've all seen the video. He's pulled over for a routine. He's got a cracked taillight. He explains to the officer that he has a gun, and just that thought changes the scenario. This man was a law-abiding citizen exercising his Second Amendment right, and he was killed by the police for no reason. There's no apparent reason, aside from what I believe the officer reacting because he was fearful. Clyde Bundy, he had been on federal lands using it to graze cattle, and he never paid. He was actually, shirking on his responsibility of paying the government. And then he was given a bill, and he refused to pay, and so he took this as an affront. And he challenged the federal government, and then people brought up on his cause, and they came to his ranch. They came to this area armed. I mean, they were threatening federal officers with high-powered rifles, but yet they were painted in the press as patriots. They were painted in the press as being people that had legitimate grievances with the government, and they were petitioning the government, right, by their lawful Second Amendment rights. If you were to flip that script and you had black folks armed like that, you have to imagine the outcome would have been very, very different. And it comes down to basically, who do these folks look like? It's hard to shoot someone if they remind you of your brother or your father or your son. If you see someone as someone that's not like you at all or is a threat, they're going to be treated differently. And that's where the double standard comes in.
If you're exercising a right, a lawful legal right, and you're doing it the right way, you should have nothing to fear.
Never criticize us.
You say then that the United States is not the black man's country.
Definitely
American
not.
laws
No,
are
no.
not black men's laws.
No.
American laws are not the black man's laws.
Well, the laws here in America were made by white people for the benefit of white people. The Constitution was written by whites for the benefit of whites. It was never written for the benefit of blacks. And when you read the Constitution, I think in Article 1, Section 2, or Section 1, Article 1, some one of the two, and it's in the Constitution. It says that it classifies black people as 3/5 of a man. 3/5 of a man, subhuman, less than a human being. It relegates us to the level of cattle, hogs, chickens, cows, a commodity that could be bought and sold at the will of the master. No, it was written by whites for the benefit of whites and to the detriment of blacks. And when a black man stands up talking about his constitutional rights, he's out of his mind.
You say, for example, I will have to discuss with my boys whether they can truly be friends with white people. History has provided little reason for people of color to trust white people.
And the argument I make is, look, in a country where it turns out that when the most vulnerable people of color are under threat, those who they count on are nowhere to be seen. If we have a president who marshals forces of hatred and anger and divisiveness and, frankly, just danger, if the people who call themselves your friends are not going to push back against that, then maybe you can tell me why it is I should trust those people. When those who count themselves as your friend see that others put you in danger,
right,
it is their opportunity to prove they're your friend. It's fine to be friendly with them, but these are not your friends. We live in a country where we oughtn't pretend that these divides have not consistently been on racial grounds. And we see that over and over and over.
That's true. I agree.
When black people are in danger from, say, addiction, we get policing. When white people are in danger from addiction, they get rehabilitation. When black people don't have jobs, we get stories about why we're making the wrong choices. When white people don't have jobs, we get a presidential campaign about the forgotten class.